what I like about this little model of little figurine of William Shakespeare, or Shaky Bill, or other names, the Bard, apparently some people call him, is that actually if you look carefully, he's got one thumbs up here, but the other one, his other arm, is a manufacturing fault. It's on actually back to front. And I really like that. The reason I like it is that when we think of someone like Shakespeare or Beethoven or Mozart or something like that, we think it's got to be perfect or there's some sort of genius happening. Yes, those people would be what we classify as geniuses, but actually they were working people, working musicians. Shakespeare himself was a working actor and a working playwright, and that's what he did every day of his life. Plays of William Shakespeare either provoke fear or deep love. And that kind of sums up Shakespeare, because there's no sort of in between. There's no stuff in Shakespeare that is in the middle. It's all very dramatic. It's like the sports plays of the week. It's all high intensity, big moments in people's lives. Normally when I start talking about Shakespeare, I like to say I'm not an expert. I do know some things, but this is from an actor's perspective. It's from a director's perspective. And normally I ask either a classroom or a bunch of actors, who here hates Shakespeare? And someone will put up their hand. It's my job for you to understand why you're having a strong reaction to it, whether that's you love it or you hate it. Now, the reason why we study something like Shakespeare, why would we study something or perform something that's over 400 years old? Why would we do that? Now, there's a reason for this. It's because Shakespeare and his contemporaries sort of changed the dramatic form forever from that point. So when we go back in history to the Greeks and the birth of Western drama, what we see is a hero or a heroine, and you might be familiar with tragic hero or tragic heroine. The hero or the heroine goes along on a journey and they become very popular, and they become heroes like Hercules and Theseus and people like that. Then what happens is that the god or gods step in and they do something, and the fates do something to this hero or heroine, and that turns their journey upside down. And then what happens is that this person might go on a journey of decline, probably, if it's a tragedy, ending in the death of other people and themselves. So this was the dramatic form, and it was the way that people explain things all the way through the Middle Ages and the medieval times. But we get to Shakespeare's period and people are interested in something else. They're interested in the human being separate from God, or in a dualism with God. So what we've got is a hero or heroine going along, and what happens is they become very popular, very everyone knows them, and so you'd be someone like Macbeth or Hamlet or say Romeo or Juliet, and what would happen is that this character would make a choice. They make free will, and this free will became very, very important in Shakespeare's time, because it was a discussion about the human being not being a perfect human being and not being external influences coming at them, but actually internal choices. So this idea about the inner monologue or the soliloquy is about the internal processes, the psychology of character. And the psychology of character is what Shakespeare does best. And so when this hero or heroine gets to this point and they make a decision, will I kill the king? Should I not kill the king? Will I cease to exist or exist? Do I want to put up with all this stuff in the world, or do I want to cease to exist? Will I choose Romeo, or will I choose my family? These are big internal questions that these characters ask, and they are given soliloquies for it. So this internal monologue, actually as a plot driver, is unique in Shakespeare's time, and it actually changed the dramatic form forever. And we're very familiar with it now because it forms modern psychology. They were so interested, the Elizabethans and the Jacobeans in Shakespeare's time, about human nature and the imagination. And the reason why Shakespeare looks really hard to us, or he sounds very hard to us, is that the language is so verbose, so big, it's sort of thick in its structure and in its content. And there's so many words. Now, we've got to realize why this is. So in Elizabethan times or Jacobean times, people are looking outside of themselves. They're imagining things outside of themselves. They're taking ships and going on merchant journeys across the world, across the seas to other places, and coming back with stories and goods and different things. This expansion, this curious desire coming out of the sort of narrow thinking of the Middle Ages, this broadness of thought brought about a broadness of language. And that's why people talk about Shakespeare and the Elizabethans and the Jacobeans as having this huge vocabulary, more words than what we have today. We live in a world where we reduce language, so we're constantly cutting language down. It's probably because of the Industrial Revolution, because of computers. We truncate everything. We cut language all down, so we abbreviate so much, and we use less language, which is a weird thing to think, that 400 years ago there was a society of people who some couldn't even write, but they had more access to more vocabulary than we have today. That's kind of crazy to think about. So they were very interested in this broadness, and that's why it looks weird to us on the page, because we look at it and we go, why is someone talking this much? Why would you even discuss it this much? Well, there's a reason for that too. In the past, people would say, let's go and hear a play, not see a play, hear a play. It's where the word rehearsal comes from. This hearing of a play was really important because each play has its own music. It has its own sound, like different symphonies have their own sound, or different recording artists have their own sound. Shakespeare, in all his plays, which is due to his great genius at writing, is that those plays all have a different music. Macbeth has a different kind of music to Hamlet or to Romeo and Juliet. Now, we might think about music as genre. So if you're studying English, you might think about this as genre. If you're studying drama, you might think about conventions. But in terms of genre, we might take a play like Macbeth and think, well, what is the music of this play? What is it? Well, it's a psychological horror. So think about all the kind of horror movies you've watched, or the psychological horror movies you've watched that are scary and frightening and have supernatural elements in it. That's a good way to approach something like Macbeth. It's an easy way in for you to understand the world of those plays. Similarly, Hamlet is a sort of domestic thriller about murder and incest and all these kind of crazy concepts that this poor young man, who's not inexcusable in his behavior, but this young man is thrust into the middle and he makes some terrible choices as well. And then Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet. What is Romeo? Is it a play about love? Probably not. It's probably a play about passion, about violence, about how people can fall in love in 2 days and then get married in 5. It's a kind of crazy roller coaster ride of people who are just full of passion, ready to kind of cut someone down straight away with a sword or a blade. So these plays all have these different music to them, or different genres. And that, to clue into that first, is actually one of the most important things. Then we get into the kind of miniature stuff of the language. What are we looking at here? So we've got this verse, this poetry. Why are these people speaking in poetry? Why are they doing that? Well, you might have your teacher talk about iambic pentameter, and I'm not going to talk about that too much today, except to say that it is a rhythm of poetry. So we have something called the blank verse, which most of the soliloquies are in, not all of them. That blank verse has a rhythm to it. Remember, I was talking about music. And it's this rhythm that gives the drive of the character. Now, the I am, which is the sound, this on top of the meter, sounds like the human heartbeat. And that's no accident. It's not like it's not like Shakespeare and his contemporaries went out and went, okay, we're just going to write some beautiful poetry and we're going to choose any kind of rhythm. They chose the human heartbeat because it speaks to us as human beings. So this human heartbeat underneath these internal monologues or soliloquies is really important, because at the same time there are philosophers in France, a man called Montaigne, who's looking at the human being as a complete thing. Sometimes separate from God, sometimes God-like, sometimes a bit devil-like. So how can we have these things in us that are both good and bad? So Macbeth is a pretty good guy when the play begins, but over the course of the play he makes some very bad decisions and actually fractures his character. Why do people do these things? Why do human beings who have good intentions become bad, or what some people might say, are they evil? Now, Montaigne and Shakespeare weren't particularly interested in, are people evil? What they're interested in is, how does human nature, the contradictory part of human nature, so people who say one thing and do another, or do one thing and say another thing, and we all have examples in our life of that happening. Extreme examples might be, someone like a tyrant, like say Hitler or someone. How does someone like Hitler do what Hitler did? Is he evil? Is he a monster? Now, what Shakespeare does is we go inside the mind of someone like that. So inside Macbeth's mind, and think about why is he doing these things? Why is he making these choices of free will? It's not an external thing. It's not like the gods or fate are telling him to do that. That's the easy way out. It's choices he made. They're consequences he made himself. And that's what makes the Shakespeare so interesting to watch. In these soliloquies, they're a really quick way to understand them is to understand the structure of the soliloquy. It's just like writing an essay. The word essay means to attempt. These are just characters attempting to work out what's going on in their brain. There is a thing called a thesis or a topic sentence, just like your essays. And then there is the body of the speech, which is the antithesis or the argument or the comparing and contrasting, if you want to call it that. And then at the end, there is the synthesis, which is the conclusion. So if we look at something like Hamlet, to be or not to be, that's the question. There's your topic sentence. To exist or not to exist, that literally is the question I'm asking internally. Then he goes on to talk about, well, if I put up with all this stuff in the world, that's not really good. But if I kind of kill myself and go somewhere else, maybe all this pain and suffering or the mental anguish of living will go away. Oh, hang on a second. But if I die, what comes after death? And I don't really know. And plus God kind of said, maybe suicide isn't a good idea. And then he argues these two things against each other and comes to the conclusion that he will not kill himself. Good idea. Same with Macbeth. If it were done when 'tis done, 'twere well it were done quickly. If I kill the king, when I kill the king, I better do it quickly. Why? Topic sentence, the antithesis, these opposites in the middle. If I kill the king, I'm going to get a reward straight away. It's like I'm winning the lottery. I'll just get the crown and boom, I won't have to go through all this weird process of society. I'll just get it straight away. But the problem is, if I put violence out into the world, violence will come back and get me. And actually, the king he's been pretty nice to me and he's a pretty decent guy. Actually, conclusion, synthesis, I don't think I should kill the king. Enter Lady Macbeth, changes his mind. This shows you the contradictory nature. Someone like Juliet, gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds, towards Phoebus' lodging. Here she is standing, she's married her love Romeo in secret, and she's waiting for them to consummate their marriage. She's basically saying, quick, the sun go down, hurry up, hurry up. And then she's nervous at the same time as trying to be a woman. So it's a person stuck between young adult and adult. And there's an opposition there. And she just wants the sun to hurry up and go down. But there's a discussion there like new snow on a raven's back. There are all these antitheses, these opposites in the middle. It's the opposites that give the tension, and it's there in the writing. And that's what actors and directors look for, because that's what gives interesting drama. It comes alive. Now, you can sit down and look at it like an essay around the classroom, but the problem is with just looking at it, it's just a chunk of text in front of you. Remember I said hearing the play is most important? You need to read it. You need to read it aloud. You need to get up and act it and be stupid. That's the whole point of the work, is that it is meant to be acted. It's written by actors for actors. Now, Shakespeare just didn't write it himself. He also had a group of actors around him that were helping, and he was a magpie. And I'll let you in a little secret, he definitely plagiarized. So he cheated, and he used different stories and different things and lifted different bits of text from other writers. And his actors most definitely would have contributed lines, characters to those plays to make him great. Because you've got to remember, it's not just one person doing this, it's all of you trying to understand in your classroom, all of you trying to understand what it means to be a human being. That is the genius of Shakespeare.